years. I believe some people have tried to get some permits or ethical clearance in order to try to do that, but they haven't quite managed to get birds of prey to mock charge these chameleons yet. But no, I'm not sure.
Okay, thanks very much, Jessica. The next speaker is Xander Combrink from Isambelo, working on the Nile Crocodile program at St. Lucia, and he will be talking about the resilience of a depressed Nile crocodile population at Lake Sibaya.
Thanks a lot. Good afternoon, everyone. The topic of this talk is resilience of a depressed Nile crocodile population, and it's part of the ongoing monitoring at Lake Sibaya, crocodile monitoring, by Isambelo, supported by the Isimangalisa Threatened Species Project, as well as later on the Zululand Crocodile Research Program. For those of you that don't know where Sibaya is, it's sort of roughly in between Cozy Bay and the Lake St. Lucia estuarine system down here in the south. It's a very important system. It is the largest permanent freshwater lake in southern Africa. It's an area of spectacular beauty, and it's also an area that's got extreme conservation importance. There's a number of species endemics that's only found in or near the lake. So all in all, it's a very important area, and it's been recognized for that by the Ramsar Wetland Convention in 1991, and in 1994 it became provincial protected area, and in 1999 it became part of the Greater St. Lucia Wetland Park, which is now Isimangaliso. If we zoom in a little bit closer, we can see sort of a very interesting shape. It's got a main basin, and then it's got a northern arm, it's got two southern basins, and it's got a very long dendritic western arm. And I've pointed out these islands right here. The lake is primarily fed by groundwater. There is no major rivers or stream entering Sibaya, so it really is a reflection of the groundwater of the wider region. And the fact that the lake level has been dropping due to the drought that we've been experiencing the last 10 years or so is quite important. We'll come back to that a little bit later. Crocodiles, Nile crocodiles, in terms of their total estimated numbers in South Africa, there's less than 7,000. Tony mentioned rhinos. There's just more than 20,000 wild rhinos in South Africa. There's less than 7,000 crocs. People tend to think of all the thousands of farm crocs and they group that together, and they actually don't realize that Nile crocodiles really are, they're threatened, they're a red listed species, but their population numbers are not very large in South Africa. In this province there's about 2,500, and of the three most important populations we have two in KwaZulu-Natal, St. Lucia and Tundumu Game Reserve. Crocodiles is also a top aquatic predator, so from an ecological point of view they are very important, and they're an iconic species, a wetland species. Every day in St. Lucia between sort of 4 or 7 boats go out, and if you ask the people what do they want to see, they want to see hippos and they want to see wild crocodiles. Let's go to Sibaya and look at the crocodile population there. The first record that we have in terms of the number of crocs at Sibaya was in 1958 when Ken Tinley, a Natal Parks Board ecologist, surveyed the lake. He didn't really survey it for crocodiles per se, but he did mention, I'll read to you, large numbers of crocodiles inhabit the lake and the surrounding lesser lakes and pans. Some specimens are of an extremely large size, probably up to 20 feet in length. That's a big crocodile. Several of the nesting sites were observed in various parts of the area. So that was 1958. So that's obviously not a total count or survey by any means, but as an ecologist, he saw lots of crocodiles. And obviously we wanted to kind of know what had happened historically. So what we did is we had one figure for 1970. It was a nesting survey done by Mike Bruton, and we took that 30 nests, which was the nest count that year, and based on sex ratios and nesting effort in nearby Lake St. Lucia, we've estimated the population to be in 1970, in terms of adults, between 164 and 374. So we don't know, but that's kind of our best guess in terms of what the population could have looked like in 1970. Then in 1986, the very first aerial count were conducted, and 75 crocs were counted. Bear in mind, this is an index of relative abundance, so this is the number of animals that were counted. This is can be regarded as a minimum count. Basically what we see then, a few years later, it went up to 107 crocs, which, as you can imagine, was not an increase. Crocodiles just don't grow that fast. It probably was just a result of increased efficiency in terms of counting, experience gained, and possibly even really good counting conditions that particular year, 1990. What I have done is I've omitted the years where there was no counts, just to make the graphics a bit more visual. So you'll have to see, you understand there's some gaps in between some of these bars. Then in 1993, you can see between 1990 and 1993, there's a considerable drop. That could have been possibly a really bad day, but from there, the trend is very evident. Every year, every subsequent count that was surveyed, the population went down to 2008, 2009, when 7 crocs were counted. In fact, in 2009, it was 2 adults and 5 sub-adults. So something is seriously wrong in that lake in terms of crocs. And what I'll do is I'll just briefly take you through some of the main threats to crocodiles. There are others, but these are the main ones pertaining specifically to Lake Sibaya. The first and the most important is, we think, targeted killings of crocodiles driven by the demand in the muti trade. So it's not for skin or even necessarily for the fact that they might be taking the odd cow. It's driven by demand in the muti market. And it's almost like eradication, a systematic eradication by possibly just a few people. The other threat, opportunistic killings. There it's just where there's a chance. I mean, crocodiles aren't loved by people. They can do damage to livestock as well. So they don't have, when people get the chance, they will destroy them. This is just a typical croc trap at Sibaya, where they use a dog which they freshly kill, and they put it on a stick, and they have a snare, a wire cable attracting the croc into the trap. This is a baited hook that we found inside the carcass of a croc, so the croc would swallow the meat that covers the baited hook, and then trying to get away, it probably won't be able to. If it's a smallish croc, obviously tied to a tree or some other structure. This particular one did get away, but it was so much internal injuries that he died later on. The other threat to crocodiles, also a very serious threat that most people probably would not even associate, and that's cattle disturbance. Disturbance of nests, mainly cattle, but also people, fishermen. And what they really do is, by disturbing the crocs would go back into the water, and that creates a window of opportunity for predators like Nile monitor lizards. So, as well as people walking around, moving around, the crocs are not near the nest, and predation can occur. It also results in crocs nesting in marginal areas, so very far from the lake, up to about 700 meters, and then those hatchlings got to get back into the main lake. And so there is that marginal areas possibly also leads to maybe not optimal recruitment in the system. And then nest abandonment. Apart from guarding the nest, the most important function of that female is to eventually unearth those hatchlings, to dig them out, because they just cannot dig themselves out of a nest. And the other thing about this particular disturbance issue is, once your population has gone down and you have this continual disturbance, there is just no chance that you can get that boost in your population, because your nesting is down, your recruitment is very, very low. The other problem, mainly for your juveniles, your young crocodiles, is habitat transformation, cultivation, specifically in your inlets. You saw those dendritic arms. There's many of them. That's prime cultivation areas, and that's also where you are going to find your young crocs. Gill nets in Sibaya possibly isn't a real problem. But at St. Lucia we are experiencing that as a problem, not so much so for crocodiles. You can see this croc has been freed they are attracted to gill nets. The young crocodiles would drown in gill nets. So the big ones generally will get away, but gill nets are probably the most important threat in the rest of Africa. So north of South Africa, because of gill nets, or they are really the threat that cause most mortalities, specifically of young crocodiles. Then another one, which is a really difficult one, is the fact that there's no incentives for the lake users to conserve crocs. They just cannot see a benefit in having crocs, and therefore those sort of opportunistic killings or disturbance of nesting sites. Back to that one slide showing just the decline to 2009. Then in 2010, we saw kind of a surprising thing, and we counted 22 crocs, which is just about 3 times as much as the count in 2009. And because we rigidly standardized counting procedures, and that particular day the conditions were optimal, so no wind, blue skies, we are very confident that that increase in the index does in fact also result as an increase in the population. So that was really good to see that. And then the next year, it went up further to 38 crocs. Now again, you can see that isn't natural reproduction. So crocs just don't grow. I mean, those are not young crocs that are suddenly grown as being counted from the air. And we know that because the majority of those animals counted were either adults or sub-adults. Now, juvenile crocs are really difficult to see from the air. So generally during aerial counts, you just don't see them. You also don't see them because they tend to hang around wetland areas on grass, so they don't bask with the other big crocs, and therefore they're very hard to spot during an aerial survey. This is the last 3 years aerial counts, and you can clearly see the increase has been in the sub-adult and in the adult component. So juveniles less than 1.5 meters, sub-adults 1.5 to 2.4, and anything above that is an adult. Then we decided we will augment the aerial data with spotlight counts. Spotlight counts are used throughout the world as a very good way of counting crocodilians because of the eye shine. So you can count them, and what spotlight counts do is they give you a different picture on your population. So although the results kind of appear to be quite similar, in 2011 we didn't do an aerial count but a spotlight count. We got 40 crocs, the aerial count 38, and then 42 in 2012. You're actually counting different individuals. So with the aerial counts you're focusing on your larger crocs, and with the spotlight counts you pick up your small crocs. Just to explain the eyes only, during spotlight counts, quite often some of the crocs will dive down before you can make a size estimate. Those are classified as eyes only, so it is a croc. You definitely confirm it's not a hippo, it's a croc, but you couldn't size the croc. Most often those crocs will be adults. It's been shown throughout the world that the bigger the croc is, the more wary it gets. So generally your eyes only component will be adults, but here we saw a very interesting thing, and that is this very large juvenile component in 2011, and same thing in 2012, although that sort of went down a little bit. Quite possibly some of these juveniles have now become sub-adults, because you can imagine a 1.3 and a 1.6 croc might look very similar in size. So there might be some overlap here. But generally the picture is that we have suddenly good recruitment in the lake. And the interesting thing about that recruitment, it's from a very, very low base of adults. So in 2006, 2007, which would have been the time when those crocs would have been hatchlings, we estimate those juveniles to be sort of between 4 and 5 years old. We know of about 22 crocs in the system. We don't know what their sex ratios were, but also very, very low nesting. We didn't know about any nests that year. Now, nesting gets reported at Sibaya, but it's an extensive system, so you cannot expect the manager to go and walk that system to look for croc nests. It's a very, very extensive operation to do, and it will take you probably 2 or 3 weeks. But where the conservation managers do get croc nests, they give that information for us, and we map that. So it really was quite remarkable. This is just showing, as you also can see, that 30 nest that I referred to earlier on by Mike Bruton. The question is, why did the nesting go down so much? We just don't know. We do know there was a flood in 1975. There was a lot of disturbance, cattle disturbance between 1970 and 71. That's been documented, as well as a big flood in 75. But since that flood, possibly because a lot of the crocs by that time might have been killed, the nesting has just never really picked up, which makes the recruitment just so much more remarkable. So in conclusion, Sibaya contained a viable crocodile population as recently as the 1970s. That's just one point maybe which is important, that people might ask, why be concerned with these small populations of crocs? There are the Lake St. Lucia's and the Ndumus. These places like Sibaya, like Kosi, at some point they had really good populations of crocodiles, and therefore, from a biodiversity conservation point of view, we've got to conserve those areas as well. Because of a number of factors, all human-driven, the population has declined the last 30 years. It's quite important to use both techniques, both aerial surveys as well as spotlight counts in monitoring, as well as to size the crocodiles. We've seen that remarkable recruitment from a very low adult base. And the drying out of wetlands in the region, we think that's our best hypothesis for those adults that are just now appearing the last 2 or 3 years. So with the lake, well, what we see is the lake level has gone down. That reflects a drop in the water table. Wetlands close to the lake have also dried out the last year or 2 or 3, and those crocs have made their way to the lake. So at this stage, because there is quite a good population in Sibaya, we're really hoping for reproduction and for some good nesting. Now, Sibaya has been a sink population in the last 3 decades, and the challenge now is, while we have those crocs, is to make sure we can protect them. It probably is more difficult to snare and to target and to kill crocs in wetland areas that's very secretive, that's hiding away. Now they are in the lake, they're visible. And people that are targeting them would definitely be able to do it. So it's now really the time to focus efforts at Sibaya. Continue our efforts against illegal killings and interact with lake users to try and change perceptions. That is also a very important thing. Finding ways to incentivize the presence of crocs, to make it more attractive for people in various ways. There are various ways to do that. That is very important. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Xander. We've got a couple of minutes for questions. Yes, Tarek.
Xander, there seems to be a little bit of evidence at the moment that suggests that the Muzi and Nile crocodile populations